Governor, thank you so much for taking the
Thank
time
you.
to talk with me today. You know, as we quickly approach the end of 2019, I want to look back at your first year as governor. And one of the things that a governor is going to be judged on is his leadership. So I want to talk about leadership right off the bat, whether that's the daily running of the state or in times of emergency. And your leadership was tested very early on in your tenure here as governor with the shooting that happened in Dayton in August. When you were standing on that stage and people started chanting, "Do something," around you, what was going through your mind? What were you thinking, and what were your emotions that you were feeling at that moment?
Well, Fran, I thought that we should be there. We went over that morning. I texted Mayor Whaley early on that morning, and then we went over. We looked at the crime scene. As an old prosecutor, that's what it is, and just a horrible, horrible, horrible tragedy. And then we found out about a prayer vigil that night, and I said, look, I need to, as governor of the state, I should be there. Look, my reaction was, I thought they should, I understood it. There was a frustration level. There was an anger. And, the mayor said something to me. I said, look, this goes with the job, and people have every right to be angry. My job is to translate that anger into something very positive. So one of the first things that we did is we looked at what we needed to do legislatively. A lot of the things that we have proposed we were already working on, but we hurried those up because I wanted to get a package out. We also looked at things that I could do as governor without legislation. For example, when someone goes in to buy a gun, if the criminal record is not complete, if it's inaccurate, we've seen examples of people who've been able to buy guns who never should have been able to buy guns. We have to fix the criminal record system in the state of Ohio. And so we have started to do that. We're going to invest millions of dollars to do it. The state has the responsibility to do it. The input comes from about 1,400 places in Ohio, but it's not their job to pay for it. And so as a state, we need to have that. So that's something that we started to do. The package we've put forward, what we call Strong Ohio, is moving. We've had two or three hearings, I think, in the Senate. Matt Dolan from Cleveland has taken the lead on that. He gave some very compelling testimony. I'm confident that we're going to get this passed. We're going to get it passed in the Senate. We're going to get it passed in the House. I'm going to sign it. It will save lives.
I want to talk about that. We're approaching, as I mentioned, the end of 2019, so we're roughly halfway through the General Assembly. And we both know that next year's General Assembly is going to be cut a bit short because a lot of those lawmakers, especially in the House, are going to be spending their summer months and the fall.
There's something called an election, right?
That's right. They're going to be campaigning for 2020.
Sure.
How are you going to leverage your leadership to get this done either before they break in June or as soon as they get back at the end of November?
Well, first of all, I'm very happy with our relationship, my relationship with the General Assembly. I think Fran and I have had every member out here, virtually every member out here for breakfast and meetings. And the whole idea is to establish a personal relationship, because what you find when you do that is that we have a lot more in common than we disagree, and we may disagree with some things. But when you get down to education, early childhood development, protecting Lake Erie, foster care, we were able to get all of those things in the budget passed in a bipartisan way. So I'm very happy with this legislature. I'm happy with the leadership and what they have done. We have to keep moving, though, on Strong Ohio. We have to keep moving. I committed to the people of the state that we would pass legislation that did three things. One, that we could get it passed. Number two, that it protected the Second Amendment. And three, that it would actually save lives. We have innovative ideas, innovative things that we believe clearly will make a difference. I can't guarantee if we pass this legislation that we'll never have another tragedy in Ohio. Nobody can guarantee that. But what I can say is we're going to have fewer deaths, we're going to have fewer suicides, we're going to have fewer people who are killed because of violence.
In the meantime, there are other bills that are being worked on that deal with gun legislation. There's a duty to retreat bill, a stand your ground bill, and there's also a bill that would allow people to carry a concealed weapon without having to get a carry concealed weapon permit. Do you feel like you would be open to signing those kinds of pieces of legislation prior to your Strong Ohio plan being
Look,
finished?
we need to focus on Strong Ohio. We made a commitment to the people of the state. What people tell me when I travel around the state is that the people in the Oregon district who chanted, do something, that is reflected not just in the Oregon district, and not just in Dayton, but all throughout the state of Ohio. People want sensible action that protects the Second Amendment, but that, for example, enables a family who had, and I saw this when I was a prosecutor, I saw this as Attorney General, I see it as governor. Horrible tragedy. Family's got someone who has a mental health problem, usually male, frankly, has a mental health problem or substance abuse problem, alcohol problem, and they've got guns and they're off their meds or they're on some drug and time bomb ready to go off. They call the police. The police don't feel that they have the authority today to do something about it, and the family then says, my God, what are we going to do? We have an answer to that in this bill.
Do you think it would be a mistake for lawmakers not to do something on this before they start campaigning for that next election in 2020?
Well, I'm kind of an impatient guy, but I think that we have to have the process has to work out. It is working out. But I certainly hope that early next year, and expect early next year, to be signing this bill into law. August is when the tragedy, August 4th, I'll never forget it, that's when the tragedy occurred. August 6th is when I presented the outline of my proposal to the legislature. We worked on it hard for 2 months, and then came back. It was introduced by Senator Dolan. So we're going through the process. It's important, but we need to get it done.
How do you feel about allowing some of the local municipalities to have greater control over gun laws, especially given the fact that most of the violent crimes involving guns happen in larger cities like, say, Dayton or Cleveland, Columbus or Cincinnati?
Look, I think it's always a balance whenever we're talking about local control, whether it is plastic bag regulation or guns or anything else. You've got to balance it out. And it seems to me there's got to be a compelling reason for the state to intervene. But, I'm not going to do hypotheticals here today. I think we got to start with Strong Ohio, and we got to get it passed. But I do want to say that as part of Strong Ohio, we have a real answer to the mayors who say we've got a few violent people in our community and they're killing people. We got to do something about it. If you look at Dayton just as an example, on August 4th, the day that 10 people were killed, up to that date that year, they had lost, I think, 14 or 15 people who had been killed in violence. And I will almost guarantee you that in every case, the perpetrator was a repeat violent offender. So as part of our package, Strong Ohio, we have a provision in there that says that if someone has been convicted of a violent offense in the state of Ohio, and they've been told time and time again they're not allowed to have a gun, and they continue to have a gun, that if we find them, or the police find them with that gun, we're going to, throw the book at them and lock them up for a long, long time. What we have found in these communities, and what the mayors will tell you, and what the chiefs of police will tell you, is that if you could get rid of a handful of people in most of these cities, you'll get rid of most of your violent crime.
Let's talk about education funding. This has been a difficult situation for Ohio to deal with for the past 20 plus years. Ever since DeRolf and the ruling there, we seem to have not been able to find a good solution for funding education. Your administration froze funding as it was set up here in this current budget. What is your administration's plan moving forward, though?
Well, first of all, one of the things I'm very proud of is that I have been hearing from teachers for years the complaint, look, I can teach, my kids can learn, but Johnny comes to school and he's hungry, Mary comes to school and she's been traumatized because her mom's an addict, Joey comes to school and he's got other trauma, and so in answer to that, we set aside, and the legislature set aside, $675 million over 2 years to go to what we call wraparound services. This can be mental health services, this can be counseling, all kinds of things to help that child be better prepared to actually be able to study in school. That was revolutionary. Nothing like this has ever been tried in the state of Ohio. And my message to superintendents, my message to principals and school boards is The law only allowed me to provide enough money, in the legislature to provide enough money for 2 years. But I will guarantee you, as governor of this state, my next budget will have an equal amount of money in there for these wraparound services or more money. And I'm convinced that we can get that passed through the legislature. So don't hesitate to go out and hire a counselor. Don't hesitate to go spend this money now, because we're going to come back and continue to give you that money to do that. Now, as far as the formula, school funding, I started in the state legislature as a state senator many, many years ago, and we were hassling about school funding formula then. I think that there is a consensus that we certainly need to take a hard look at this. The legislature is doing this. The Cupp-Patterson study is continuing. I await, as does the rest of the legislature and the people of Ohio, to see exactly what they're going to come up with and what their proposal is, and we're going to take a look at it.
Let's talk real quickly about diversifying energy here in Ohio. You pushed for HB 6. It passed. What is your administration's plan to promote energy diversity so that we don't end up in the same problem again, where we're held hostage to bail out a private company?
Well, I think diversity is important in energy production. But as far as your question about where we go, we need balance. Yes, I was in favor of taking the action that we needed to allow our nuclear energy to continue in Ohio. It's a lot of jobs. It gives us some balance. If we would have lost our nuclear energy completely, which is what would have happened if we had not acted, we would have lost 90% of our non-carbon producing energy in the state of Ohio. So for those of us who are concerned about carbon, you're concerned about all the things connected with that, to throw away nuclear and say we're not going to use nuclear anymore just made no sense. But it needs to be a balance. It needs to be wind. It needs to be solar. We're obviously having less and less coal, and that movement will continue across the country.
One of the first bills you signed was a heartbeat abortion bill. Since signing that bill, members of the pro-life movement have put forward the next big bill, which would be to completely ban abortion totally, no exceptions for rape or incest. You and I have talked about this before, about how it may be too early for that kind of legislation, that you would like to see this play out at the Supreme Court level. But my question to you is, why not swing for the fences? Why not go for the whole kit and caboodle if you're confident that the Supreme Court is going to rule in your favor?
Well, first of all, I want to put this in context. This is a pro-life administration. I want to define what that means. It means we're concerned and feel that the essential function of government is to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That includes the unborn. It also includes the baby that is in the mother and making sure that mother gets the prenatal care that she needs. Making sure that we do everything we can to reduce not only infant mortality, which is horribly high in Ohio, but the mortality of the mother. We're losing too many mothers. So being pro-life means a lot of things, but we cannot forget that it means not only the unborn, but it means the child in the womb. It means the child who is born. We're putting a real emphasis on 0 to 5. One of the things that Fran is working on is the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. Take it to every part of the state of Ohio, 0 to 5, a book a month for every child. These are things that we have to do. And so it's a very consistent, holistic approach. As far as the heartbeat bill, I said when I was running that I would sign that bill. I also said that we are not going to know the outcome until that bill or a bill from Michigan or some other state reaches the United States Supreme Court, and then the court makes a decision about whether or not they are going to modify or overrule Roe v. Wade. And so we're waiting. It's on track. We fully expected, based on current constitutional precedent, that the lower courts would not agree with our law, and we expected that. Ultimately, the Supreme Court is going to have to make that decision. I think it is right for us to wait until we get that decision from the Supreme Court to better know where we're going to go in the future.
My final question for you has to deal with life in a different fashion. Ohio currently is holding off executions. Where are we at, and where's the path forward for the death penalty here in Ohio?
Well, we're at a standstill. To put it simply, because the Ohio law today only provides one method of execution, and that is lethal injection. There's no other way to carry out the death penalty in the state of Ohio. Ohio we're at a standstill because our Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections cannot get the drugs to do this. One of the reasons we can't get the drugs, candidly, is because we have threats from drug companies who produce a lot of drugs that if we use one of their drugs for an execution, they will not allow the state to buy, or Medicaid, folks on Medicaid, or folks in our mental hospitals will no longer be able to get those drugs. So they really have Ohio over the barrel, and that's exactly where we are.
Would you like to see that changed, or are you comfortable with possibly seeing an end to the death penalty here in Ohio?
Well, we are where we are. We can't really move forward unless DRC does, in fact, find additional drugs. So we'll have to see. I'll see how that plays out.
Any final thoughts for the viewers at home about what you have coming up for next year?
Well, we're looking to the future. We have more to do in regard to foster care, certainly a lot more to do in regard to mental health. One of the things that concerns me is what we're seeing particularly among young people. We're seeing families that can't find help for their kids or can't find help for their adult family members. We've increased funding in that area. We've increased the services in that area. But we have to really take a holistic approach and look at this. It's been several decades since we closed down our mental hospitals in the state. The commitment the state made at that time to the local communities was, well, we're going to replace that with money going into the local boards so that they can supply the services. State did not do that. State failed to do that. So we've got to step up in the future, and we've got to really take a hard look at that. So you're going to see our administration really focusing a lot on that in the future.
Thank you so much for your
Thank
time.
you.